All right, well, Julie's still in her coat off. We'll call the work session to order of the Edina City Council. It is Tuesday, October 15th, 2024, 5:31 p.m. And we'll call, as we call the meeting to order, then we will ask our clerk, Sharon Allison, to call the roll as well.
Councilmember Acme. Here. Councilmember Jackson.
Here.
Councilmember Pierce.
Here.
Sorry, Councilmember Risser. Here. Mayor Hovland.
Here. All right, we've got two topics tonight. Scott's going to introduce the first topic, which is our legislative platform preparation, and let us know what the staff is working on initially here as we begin to formulate that for the upcoming legislative session. So.
Yeah, and this will just be quick, Mr. Mayor and members of council. We have the new state platform, the state legislative platform is to a stage where we're looking for your input on it now. So we will get that to you, or get, they have that already?
What's that?
They have it already? You have it?
It's
in the packet, okay,
Yeah,
okay.
both states.
So we're looking for your impact, your comments, your ideas, your suggestions, and any of this material. We'd like to get it by November 15th. That gives us time to incorporate that, or at least propose to incorporate it before we ask you to take a final approval on it. We're trying to get this out and ready to share with legislators just as fast as we possibly can, because the session starts a little earlier than it has in at least last year. So that's all that's about.
Okay. Do you want to talk about the meeting we had last week with Heather at all? I mean, it's sort of legislative preparation meeting. Heather Edelson
and
Julie Green.
Yep, we had a brief meeting with them just to share kind of what our concerns were going into the session, talk a little bit about sales tax and how that particular issue seems to be where it's kind of falling in line.
Okay. And some bonding issues that we face. Yeah. Okay. And,
Would it be possible to get a track changes version of the legislative priorities, kind of year over year?
That'd be great. Yeah, I can do that.
Thank you.
I have heard from one resident concern about the sales tax expanding that, and I can understand the concern, which is, would this only benefit the two parks that are already reaping benefits from the sales tax? More clarity on that would be really helpful. And putting this, as a way of serving as a revenue generator by extending it, I think there's nervousness. And people see a similar kind of approach with unspent TIF monies. And so that is what I am hearing, and I totally understand that concern, so I do want to just note that.
Fortunately, none of those concerns are part of what we're going to propose.
Okay. So they'll be very specific.
They have to be.
Asks.
Yep.
Okay.
And there's going to be some legislative change at the legislature, because they have been working on this committee for a couple of years now. They're reaching the end of the second year. So there'll be a bill coming out of that we need to pay attention to.
Okay.
So how do you want feedback on this? You want just notes from us, or?
Yeah.
Sorry, I had quite a few.
However you wanna do it.
May I ask a question? On the federal legislative platform, this post office preservation, okay, I think it's worded the same way every year.
It is.
And so is there ever planning that happens 2 years later?
Yeah. Because now they're within the lease that Lunds has on that building is getting to the point within 2 years where it'll be expired. And there's discussions going on right now about whether the post office wants to stay in the general neighborhood or move. Those discussions were premature or very early stages the last couple times we've been in DC, but now they're real.
Okay.
And back to the state legislative platform, item number 5, it'd be really helpful to know with the support for entrepreneurs, what kind of class sizes and people, how many people have gone through the innovation lab, and just be able to get an understanding of, I guess, just more data about that. Okay.
Gather that for you. But that's all I have for that. I wonder if somebody, I think it was Jennifer suggested that maybe we do introductions. We have some folks here that don't usually come to this.
Good thought. Chad, you wanna?
Sure. Chad Miller, city engineer.
Andrew Scipione, transportation planner.
Tom Swinson, Assistant Director of Parks and Natural Resources.
Julie Risser, council.
Carolyn Jackson, council.
Jim Hovland, council.
James Pierce, council.
Kate Agnew, council.
Scott Neal, city manager.
Brian Olson, Public Works Director.
Derek Leonard, sidewalk inspector.
Sharon Allison, City Clerk.
Sean Anderson, Street Supervisor.
David Yanagazawa, IT Support.
Jennifer Benner, Communications. Harry Lenz, Assistant City Manager. Zoe Johnson, City Manager, Development.
Awesome. We'll get right into it. Did you want to kick it off at all? So we're hoping to get some feedback this evening on sidewalk maintenance policy. This came out of a couple of things, right? We promised the one neighborhood this spring that we'd have this conversation. This time, some year concerning a very specific portion of sidewalk that was just built. So we'll have that as our second topic. But we wanted to first kick it off with the citywide sidewalk maintenance policy. And we had the report on a lot of information. And 4 of us are going to present various aspects of this and then seek some feedback. On both those topics. So we'll just get into the big picture. And we talked about this big picture idea in 2018. We were here and had a conversation at a work session in 2018. So we were able to update some numbers and provide some additional information, update some costs and stuff. So starting at the beginning here, what's our existing conditions? And we broke this down into 3 categories: city maintained sidewalks, privately maintained sidewalks, and then unmaintained. And we're looking at this from a winter perspective. And then down the left-hand side is what type of sidewalk. So is it in a state or county right-of-way? Is it on an MSA route? Is it on an active routes to school? Is it on city property or other? So we highlighted a couple things that we've heard recently from council. The city maintained, we maintain today 70.5 miles. Public Works does that today. And then privately maintained, there's 24, almost 25 miles of sidewalks that are privately maintained. Do you have a question, Carolyn?
Julie's having a hard time seeing the screen, that's all.
Okay. Want me to move my head is what you're saying? I was just leaning over here, so I can move back.
There we go.
Okay, no problem. And then we'll hand it over to Brian for 3 slides to just talk about what operations Public Works does today.
Yeah, so I just want to step back a little bit more. We both started like within 2 weeks in 2012. And we analyzed kind of our snow plowing system and paid attention to it. In about 2014, PAX Fund started. And the PAX Fund is allowed to be, with new sidewalks, provide the funding mechanism for those new sidewalks. In 2018, when we talked about it, we quickly realized that our snow plowing for our sidewalks are our worst level of service that we were providing. It literally, at that point, took us somewhere in the 2-day time frame to get those done. In 2018, or between 2014 and 2018, we did add 1 new guy, and we got back from Centennial Lakes a trackless machine that allowed us to have 5 different routes. We were able to get things done in less than 2 days at that point. And so we, at that time in 2018, were doing 62 miles of streets or sidewalks. And we figured that it was about 1 route per 11 miles that we could do and still get done in less than 2 days. Now we're up to 70, just over 70. We haven't added any new staff. However, we have added staff that has allowed us to, as he mentioned, in 2021, we did a staffing analysis. We were able to hire Derek because the staffing analysis indicated that we should be doing a proactive look rather than a reactive look at our sidewalks for tripping hazards and that kind of thing. And so Derek is gonna get a little bit into that. But by ordinance, we're currently only really required to do anything that was constructed on a with state aid money or within a county road or a state road. Except then, since then, we've implemented the safe routes to school, and so we've kind of taken those on, but that's not according to ordinance. And then there's obviously, if the council decides to maintain a sidewalk that's not on a county state aid road or a state aid road, we do that too. In 2018, we had 5.6 miles of additional outliers that didn't meet our criteria, some of which was like Hanson Boulevard was originally a state aid road, right? And when we went through the state aid redesignation process, Hanson dropped off that list, but we weren't gonna say, okay, we're not gonna maintain it anymore. Other things that occurred, maybe a section of sidewalk was proposed and then it was constructed the following year and we needed to go, we would have literally, like Beard Avenue, I'm just gonna use that as an example. From an operational perspective, it made no sense for us not to maintain that one because we were going from the park to the north to 58th, and then from 58th to 60th, the sidewalk was constructed. We literally, in order to get to our next sidewalk, we would have had to pull out into the road and purposely not do it when, you know, we can spend just a little bit of extra time and do it. And so we communicated with those property owners that we were gonna take on that maintenance responsibility in the winter. We feel very strongly that if the ordinance says that we require private residents to do a snow removal within 48 hours, that we comply with that same condition. And so kind of, even when we did the staffing analysis, we kind of understood that the staffing analysis was gonna stay the status quo. If there's changes to that, then we would have to change what we recommend in terms of staffing. So that's what I wanted to talk about.
Brian mentioned the trackless machine, that's our sidewalk plow machine, that's what you see in the picture here. So when he says trackless, that's the sidewalk.
Yeah, so there's one thing that in the country club district, most of the sidewalks were constructed 4 feet wide, and the sidewalk machine would literally tear up every single yard as they went through with a 4-foot sidewalk. So we have never taken responsibility for those, and we would need to consider a different piece of equipment. They do make something that's smaller now, but it's not very powerful. If you can imagine when the sidewalk gets covered with street snow, it's heavy and wet, it has to be powerful, it has to have the ability to blow that, otherwise it's no real use to us. And that is...
Brian already touched on this, the 48 hours of city code, and then we have 5 machines. This is again is a picture of that trackless machine, as you mentioned.
One of the recommendations in the staffing analysis was that we take a look at our redesign of our route, snow route system. And one of the things that we were able to do is we are stretching the amount of miles that each machine can do because we've taken and redesigned our route system to not take any longer, but to allow for the trucks to wing back where the sidewalk plow goes, getting rid of as much snow volume as they can. It's not eliminating the need for the trackless to go through there. It still has to go through there, but it can go through a much quicker pace. And so we think because of those changes we made, we are getting a little bit longer than 11 miles in 2 days. Last year was kind of hard to tell because there was only 3 snow events. So we're getting into a point where it's pretty critical, but we think we have a little bit of capacity left, and we're going to probably be asking in the next year or 2 for an additional staff member. And incidentally, the machines In 2018, we're 108,000. Now they're 250,000. Same machine.
Then in your packet, this is just a map, so you can visualize where Public Works maintains it today and where they don't. So the green ones are city maintained, and the orange ones, you know, you look at Country Club there, that old orange bucket, those are those narrow sidewalks that our equipment just won't fit on, that's privately maintained. In the map in your packet, you could maybe see the dashed ones that are future city proposed and future private based on today's understanding of what we maintain and what we don't. And then Derek's gonna speak a little bit about summer maintenance, just to give you an update on what we do on that front.
Absolutely. Thank you. And yeah, so just to hit it off, really brief with the inspection program. We take the 4 quadrants of the city and we focus on one of those quadrants each year. We're on year 2. So we started in the Northeast. This year we're on Southeast. And with this program, I'm out there right away in the beginning and I walk every sidewalk and I collect all the data. So we're looking for all the trip hazards. We're looking for any kind of deteriorating sidewalk panels. We've upgraded. Now what we do is we also look for ADA. So I'm looking for slopes on sidewalks, cross slopes that are too steep. Then we jumped right into doing ADA ped ramps. So when it comes to the corner of an intersection, what I've noticed was a lot of our ped ramps were outdated and they needed the upgrades. So I also, during my inspections, I take the photos and get all of the slopes and the ratings, and then we build a conditional rating system with all these hazards. And then as the next step kind of progresses in the season, we get the contractors on board and we determine which projects we're gonna go after. And that goes right away. I mean, the next slide will show us, I follow the city code for trip hazards, so anything over a ½ inch is recorded and it's saved in our data. And then I can go back and I can find these exact spots. So when I get the grinding contractor set up, he knows exactly where to go. He knows that we're shaving anything from a ½ inch and above, up to a certain standard too, because most sidewalks are only 4 inches, so you're not gonna shave a 4-inch rise. Those are the ones that we deem need to be replaced. We also, on top of doing the grinding, like I said, the ADA upgrades, the ped ramps, I hit that one pretty hard this year. We did at least 18 at the moment with the hopes, if weather kind of works with us, to get at least another 6 in. And we're bringing, yeah, I mean, it's just completely tearing out the corners and putting in the new stuff up to the standards. So
that's a pretty important point too, because when the staffing analysis pointed out that we should be proactive rather than reactive, and the way it used to work, if you remember right, people that would have a tripping hazard that they either tripped on or were concerned about, they would call us. We would then go out and do an inspection. We would write a letter to the homeowner. We'd give them 21 days to repair it. If they didn't repair it within 21 days, then we did it, but we assessed them for it. That is all still the same practice, except when an ADA, we didn't feel it was fair, honestly, to take on or require a resident to take on ADA improvements, because it's not just a single panel, right? It could be 15 panels because it doesn't have the grade, and it's only the crosswalks are only at the intersections. Those ped crossing, what do they call them? Ped ramps, yeah. Ped ramps are at the corners. We didn't feel it was fair. And then recently, this last year, there's a new requirement that any overlay that we do have ADA upgraded within that area. So we're doing that with the money that we were given to move forward with the sidewalk inspection program.
So how do we know, I'm assuming the map that you showed earlier covers all of this, whether it's snow removal or a sidewalk repair?
So right now, as the last slide mentions, or if you go forward one more slide, right now we're using the same criteria to determine winter and summer maintenance. So if it's one of those streets that Brian mentioned, if it's on a county road, a state highway, an MSA route, or an active route to school or adjacent to city property, we're not only doing snow clearing, but those are also the sidewalks that the city is paying to do repair of trip hazards or ADA improvements.
But then anything that's not, so like, I think you said countryside.
Anything that is in orange on this map, we don't snow clear, and if there are trip hazards, that work is the responsibility of the property owner to do, or the city does it and we assess it back to the property owner.
The only thing we do in the orange is the ped ramps. Those corners where there's just a big area that has to meet standards for slopes and stuff that we just don't want homeowners to be dealing with on these corners, so.
You know how I feel about that? Like, it seems odd that we would have a homeowner repair the sidewalk. There's a tripping hazard in front of their home. I don't know how I feel about that. Like, we don't do that if there's like a pothole in the street in front of them.
No.
But we do assess when we do street reconstruction, the homeowner, right?
Right, but not normal maintenance, like overlays on the street, we don't assess for it.
Right. So I don't know. I
I
don't
mean,
have
the
enough.
biggest thing we see, and Derek, you can speak to, are these trip hazards that are typically tied to the trees that the owners own, and they're heaving up these panels. So there's a little connection to what's happening to the sidewalk. It's kind of tied to the trees that they're, especially country club, we had to save every tree in there. We built sidewalks up and over tree roots.
Yeah.
At the request of the owner.
The first year I started in the fall of 2022, Country Club is where I was. And yeah, we replaced 64 panels, and these are all like those trip hazards, because I didn't have a grinding contract or anything at the moment. So it was like, let's get the really bad ones and start doing this. And a lot of those were with those beautiful trees that we had to protect those roots. So I had Luther out there, and it turns, from 2 panels to 4 or 6, because we had to make sure we kept the ADA slopes right.
I think that's a good example.
So now the next step, how much are we gonna add to operational challenges, operations, if we build out our current bike ped master plan? And that would move, we would add basically 20 miles of city maintained or public sidewalks and almost 20 miles of privately maintained. That's on the master plan today. So just giving you that idea of the build out, where we're headed, close to 90 miles of city maintained sidewalks and 43 miles privately maintained. And in your packet, you saw 6 options. We just wanted to throw out some potential ideas. These are the same ideas we presented to you in 2018 of, depending on your feedback, we could analyze these more closely, but I'll just quickly run through them. Option A was continue to maintain that 2-day level of service. And we're now looking at that future state. If we're almost at 90 miles, how many pieces of equipment does Brian and his team need? And you can see that we would need to add almost 4 additional machines and operators, and then we gave you those annual expenses in today's dollars. So today it's $500,000, it'd be another $400,000 if we got to that point.
So, hold on just a sec. We're adding 20 miles, which is about a third of what we have now.
Yep.
But the cost doubles. I don't understand that.
So that was a great question. So what I was rationalizing, you said 11 days or 11 miles for 2 days.
We're exceeding the mileage today.
We're currently over capacity.
We're over
today.
capacity today. We're doing 70.
We're doing 70
But
with
you actually,
5.
with 5, but we're not meeting 2 days. So we're
I
not,
was
we're already,
just doing simple math, I thought we needed 2 more machines to close the gap in miles. And you said that the machine was 250 or something like that.
250.
this is a 10-year replacement schedule, so it's spread out over 10 years for replacement, and then we also have 10 years of maintenance. So there's tables in the report that provide that. But when you look at these numbers, we're going,
More questions from me.
well, we're going
No,
from
I just- that was-
55 miles to 90. Because these guys are doing such a good job today, they're maintaining 15 more miles when they really
Honestly,
are.
though, if we can get it done, I mean, this isn't gonna happen today, right? And this is a long-term vision of what it would take in order to provide a good quality level of service for our residents. And this is rough it's not gonna happen today. We would do this over a number of years as we continue to add sidewalks.
And if
What I'm
operations,
telling you right now is that we're at a point where we're over, capacity, and it's very difficult to get it done in 2 days. We're right at that edge, but next year we'll be asking for another person. The person that we were able to get in the staffing analysis said that they needed to get the facility staff that was currently plowing back to doing facility-only stuff. So the electricians all went from Public Works plowing to now doing service requests, day-to-day work orders. And so they don't do any plowing in the winter. We were able to reduce that ability of the electricians to plow by hiring him.
And a couple
So we
utility guys.
don't need.
And a utility guy and a street guy.
Okay, so I wasn't thinking about this differently. So we just need additional staff. We don't need more equipment.
And machine.
I thought we needed more equipment.
We do both.
Is there
Depending on what
any alternative, given the fact that last year we had 3 days, is that right, or 3 events? Are there no alternatives where you could bring in somebody from someplace else if we had, so you could build in flexibility instead of hiring a permanent staff
That's a
person?
really good question,
Like,
Councilmember Visser. The thing is, it has to be able to be sustainable, right?
Right.
One of the things that was mentioned in the past was, can we get high school kids to go out and hand shovel? Well, that's not gonna happen. We did an analysis out at 50th and France District for snow removal services that we currently provide to the 50th and France District. I think we assessed somewhere in the $200,000 to $250,000 to that entire district for 12 months of operation. To do a contract for just what we do in the winter, it was over $350,000. So the answer is yes, we can. It really boils down to whether or not they're gonna be willing to do it at a moment's notice and provide the service level that we require, and at a reasonable cost, because they still have to be staffed and manpowered to be able to respond, even if they only do 3 events in the winter.
So I'm still confused. And I'm only asking about, just so that I internalize the data right. So for the annual expense to do 89 miles is $918,000
At the 2-day level of service.
at the 2-day level of
Right.
service.
Yeah, there's plenty of other solutions that we have in the.
No, I'm with you. But my question I was getting to is, then you've got under annual expense, current is 510, and then you plus 408. So what are we saying there? Does it cost us half a million now to do 89?
no, it costs us $500,000 now to do 70.
Okay.
The 89 is a future state. So we're trying to give you, if we make a decision today, we also got to keep in mind the future state.
Got it. So the 89 then is what it is today, which is 510.
Yep.
Plus the 408 could get us 90 at 2 days.
In 20 years.
Yep.
Let's just say 20 years future state when the whole bike ped master plan is built in.
This is the notion that you're adding qualifying sidewalks that we maintain,
Current, yes, exactly.
88 streets,
Yep.
other things that we might add over time based on the sidewalk plan.
Today's kind of plan. Now, if we, option C, I think was, if council says maintain all 5-foot sidewalks, we're up to 125 miles. What is that, right? Now we went from 70, we almost doubled, and what's the number or the cost? And you can see there it's 1.2 million. And then if I go back to B, it's basically, well, we're not adding anything. We're just gonna extend how long it takes us to do it. If it takes 2 days today, we're just gonna do 3.5 days or 4 days, but keep adding miles and just let that level of service extend. We're gonna get more phone calls. It doesn't meet the ordinance that we require private property. So it's basically staffing and money versus level of service. That's the discussion here of where do you wanna go? So we just did a few more options, adding in all 5-foot sidewalks, whether we just add the machines in labor And then on the right-hand side is, we just let the level of service go down, and now we're between 4 and 5 days estimated. Now, if we have back-to-back storms, that's a whole different conversation. And then the last item E was, let's try to do 4-foot sidewalks too. Well, we don't even know if the equipment can handle it. We really just took a guess. I italicized some of the costs. We don't know if that's really what it would go, but it would go up another 10 miles if we did all the, basically the 7 miles in Country Club, all those 4-foot sidewalks. And then F, we just threw in there, like, let's stop installing new sidewalks, but I don't think that's really anything that anyone wants to do, because we have requests and guidance, and we really are trying to build out the bike and ped facilities in Edina.
Can I ask a question? At 89, does that include the twin loops?
It does not include all of it, because right now, based on our current practice, there's some segments of the twin loops that we would not maintain.
So that still needs to be a direction that we receive from the council if we want to do those twin loops idea, that should be maintained by the city.
Correct.
And that's gonna be in our additional considerations here. We felt like Twin Loop should be a facility that we maintain. It's wider, provides a multi-use facility, connects parks, schools, like that whole Twin Loops. I'll let Andrew get into some of the additional considerations for the discussion.
So in addition to kind of the cost scenarios that Chad mentioned, at the end of our report, we essentially boil it down to 3 key questions that we're looking for feedback on. One is, what is the criteria that we should use to determine what our maintenance responsibility is? Should we include sidewalks that are in commercial districts? That's currently not addressed by the ordinance, but there are some that we maintain and some that we don't. What qualifies as an active routes to school is something that has come up, particularly with the Concord sidewalk. Right now, our current practice is that unless it is specifically recommended, like a proposed improvement in the arts plan, that those are the sidewalks that we maintain. But should we be considering other sidewalks that are within that half-mile radius of the school campus? Should we consider transit routes? Our climate action plan, which was adopted a couple years ago, encourages us to promote use of transit service, doubling our transit service by 2030. In order to do that, should we be maintaining sidewalks along transit routes to encourage the use of that? Depending on what scenario, what criteria we pick, we need to do additional analysis to determine what our maintenance responsibility would be. But staff recommends that we amend what is in the ordinance to reflect what council wants us to do.
Who maintains sidewalks on county roads right now?
The city does.
We do on a contract basis, or what?
No, we do in terms of snow.
Do you mean, do we get paid to do that?
Snow related, we do.
Sidewalks on county roads, we maintain.
We do. There's actually an agreement that we have with the county that puts them on the hook to maintain in the summer. Like if we do ADA improvements, that they're responsible for 50% of the cost. But we do all the maintenance in the winter.
We fund it.
How does that happen?
It's
I mean, I get that we run more.
How long you been doing it, Sean? How long?
25 years.
How many?
25.
25 years.
There was a cost participation policy, and actually this is a discussion that many of the engineers are having right now, because MnDOT's doing cost participation policies and pushing it down to the city and the counties. The county did one 25 years ago, pushed it down to the cities, and we've been maintaining these sidewalks using tax dollars.
The county's
we're down at the bottom.
Used to be, we are a transportation provider. We don't provide walking corridors for people. That's what they did 30 years ago. But now they're starting to change their tune a little bit, and so it's interesting. It's a great question.
And we are actually meeting.
Who put the sidewalks in? They did or we did?
It's a combination. We're doing France Avenue right now because they don't have the money to do it. Sometimes we have developments do it on France. Sometimes back in the day, they probably added some. So it's a whole combination of who's building.
And now with this recent rule that any overlay requires ADA improvements to whatever pedestrian ways you have in a county road, whenever they do a county road improvement, they're required to do upgrades to the ADA or the sidewalks.
We're meeting with county leadership.
We better talk to that new county commissioner work.
Well, I'm telling you, Mayor, that the City Engineers Association is meeting with county leadership, not the board yet, but county staff,
Yeah, staff.
on this discussion right
Yeah,
now.
that's quite a significant element of the cost.
Yes,
Absolutely.
yes.
And it's a pain, honestly, because they have a 24/7 snow coverage, right? So they have multiple shifts. We don't, and they plow the county roads probably 2 or 3 times before we can even get it done once, and then they plow it back on top. It's really difficult for us to keep those sidewalks clear, especially on those that don't have boulevards.
Could we do a 24-hour shift to maintain the same number of machines, but just more people?
It would take more people,
It
is that
would
what you
take
mean?
more
Yeah.
people.
Yeah.
Yeah, so add on more people, but don't have to add the expense of more machinery.
A special contract or,
Yeah, when I think about the union contract, about whether or not we have the ability to put somebody on as a second shift, I don't know.
But that's a really good idea.
So that's my question right there. I was gonna ask a different version of that same outcome. I can't tell what's variable and fixed costs. And so if I knew what was variable, then you started talking about, well, how can I impact the variable costs? Can I use, I'm totally making this up. Are we 80% in FTE employee and 20% contractor or whatever? I assume the machines are all capital expenditures, so that's a fixed cost. But those kinds of, being able to understand that would be helpful.
The number of machines is a variable though.
Yep, number of machines is variable, time is variable.
yeah, and I think we put some of,
We use all employees?
All employees, yeah.
I think we wanted to just get some guidance from the council and then we bring back, is one of these more what you're looking for or not?
Can we go back to the map?
Yeah.
Because there were two things, can we zoom in on the area under discussion, or is that not possible?
We will do that yet, that's still,
Oh,
I
that'll
got
come.
maps zooming in on Concord if that's what you want, so that's.
Okay, and
this is
also-
still the big picture, I got active routes maps and I got
Okay.
more information on that, very detailed.
I'm
site.
also concerned about Wooddale too, though, because you can take it all the way from Country Club.
We'll talk,
Okay, there's only one little segment, and it's the steepest new hunk of sidewalk that's
Yeah.
not maintained.
we'll get into the details of
Okay.
of Concord as soon as we get the big picture discussion.
Wooddale, though, too.
Wooddale too.
So some other considerations, what should our target service level be for snow clearing? The ordinance right now says 48 hours. In staff's opinion, it's most equitable to establish the same level of service for our operations as we're requiring for the residents. So as Chad mentioned with the options that we've shown, kind of the main thing is that as the city's maintenance responsibility increases, we either need to add more machines and staff to maintain the same level of service, or we compromise that level of service. And then another question is, should our summer and maintenance responsibilities be the same? Right now, the streets that we are snow plowing are the same ones that we're doing ADA improvements, trip hazard replacement on. Those repairs are coming from combination of the public works budget and the PAX fund budget. But in theory, we could do summer maintenance on all sidewalks and still defer winter maintenance on those that those that are marked orange on the map. We would just need to amend city code to reflect that, and as well, we would also need to communicate that change to the adjacent property owners.
And update budgets. That's a big ask to add more. So we're just looking for some we provided some options. Option A is what we do today. We kind of think about, that's where we think is kind of the best one today, but we're just big picture. We'll come to Concord in a little bit and that one's really a detailed one. Citywide big picture before we get to that detailed conversation. If there's any thoughts?
Well, I feel like we need an option G.
Yeah, what's that?
Which would be based on comments both from member Pearson, member Agnew about, possibly what are the variables, what could we do to, maybe be a little bit more flexible?
Well, I guess for us, let's maybe start with just level of service.
Yeah, we
Is
come
2
at it of like,
days-
what's our preference, and I
Yeah.
think that kind of helps hone in on what options do we need to consider from a price point.
Do you wanna change the level of service? 2 days is 48 hours is what's in the code.
I
If
think
you
we
say
have
4
to
days
stick
is
with
fine,
that.
that'll,
I can't imagine going to 4 days.
Okay.
So
2 days.
just give me some grace. I think the answer to that question, I would love for the answer to be, the level of service should be what we can afford. And so we're about to have another conversation where I agree with what Member Jackson and Member Agnew said. We shouldn't do 4.5. We should stick with 2. But I'm totally saying that, not knowing what the impact is to the overall budget. And so that's like, to me, that's hard, and this is so complicated, but it's hard to do that. And so I'd love to be able to say, the level of service should be what we can afford, and the scope of what we do should also be what we can afford. But I don't know what we can afford.
Well, then I guess like, what is that question based off of?
Yeah.
It's based off of, we have a 13% proposed tax levy. That is an all-inclusive of costs. And so
It includes none of this.
Which does none of this.
Okay, all right.
Right.
This would be a next time budget cycle
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
conversation.
This
Because
is,
we would run some numbers and then come back.
Yeah, we should be clear about that. Any discussion we're having about snow, we don't change snow removal protocol and practice in October, right? We just don't. People have it in their head, this would be a big change to take on new responsibilities or change routes. It's a really big deal from a management standpoint.
So we're talking like winter of
Yeah.
2025 at the earliest,
Yeah.
and potentially even
for
more.
the global discussion,
Yeah.
but, you know, when we hone in on the area Concord and, 64th, which we're required to do anyway, and, that area, that's different. That's not holistic, that's more specific.
Go ahead.
I still think I would say the same thing, but I get what you're, in principle, I think I would still say the same thing, but I get that it doesn't impact this current cost, this current budget.
Well, how many qualifying miles of city-maintained sidewalk are we gonna be adding in the next 2 years?
I don't know if we have a.
That, I don't have that number off the top of my head. Over the last 5 years, we've been averaging less than 2 miles of sidewalk added. That's total, that includes what city maintains and what is privately maintained.
Per year or total?
Per year.
Since
On average.
2018, we had 62 miles of city-maintained sidewalks, and now it's 2024, 6 years later, we have 8 more miles. So it probably would be a mile and a half in the next 2 years. Yeah, it just keeps on adding.
It's just incremental, right? We keep adding and adding.
Yeah, well, the other thing that we talked about was called safe routes to school. So we talked, this maybe was something that popped in my head when Brian was talking. Just for confirmation purposes, are we maintaining the sidewalk to Concord Grade School and the middle school from Valley View on Concord all the way to those schools?
Well, maybe we should just get into that
Yep.
conversation. I think
Yeah.
All right, so that's the next step. The point I wanted to make here was, you say, well, should we only have sidewalks that are recommended by the arts plan? Well, if you don't have a sidewalk in the arts plan, but it probably fits within that half-mile radius.
here's the example. I was gonna speak to this, but let's just do it now. The green ones within this half-mile radius, we maintain. The orange ones, we do not. We don't maintain Tower. We don't do 56th Street. We don't do 60th Street. So there's sidewalks in the half-mile radius walk zone that we don't maintain because they were not officially called out on the active routes to school plan. So that's the conversation. And then if we continue with the current practice, the other orange dashed ones, on
59th Street and 60th.
they would not be maintained because they weren't actually called out as a a designated direct route to the school from that plan.
Does the school district set the arts plan?
No, the arts plan was something that we developed in partnership with the school district back in 2014.
So we worked, they determined where kids were coming from. That was part of the study, and then they looked at where within each school, they saw people walking and biking to school, and the plan was put together with that.
So we're maintaining half of Wooddale now, but not the other half.
Well, there wasn't a sidewalk before this year, so Councilmember Risser's already brought this up, and Brian's brought this, they're gonna go straight down and maintain that.
No.
They're not gonna leave a little piece, drive out in the street like on Beard Avenue.
Okay.
So that will effectively go green.
Yes.
That will
Okay,
go
'cause-
green.
'cause
And
you're not gonna drive by.
I just want to speak to one other topic. In this area, Woodland Road was supposed to be maintained by by the residents. We ended up with a section because of constraints of the right-of-way where the sidewalk is right against the curb. And so we were doing the same thing to this resident as the county was doing to us, throwing all of our street snow onto the sidewalk. We were getting complaints. We were going out there to deal with the complaints. We just decided we're gonna take on that segment of sidewalk. Again, that is not in the ordinance that says that, but it makes sense. It made all the sense in the world, so we did that.
It was an operational decision.
Yeah, right. Wooddale, there's no way we're gonna drive down and not do that section on our way to do the other section, right?
Kind of what you were talking about on Beard.
Exactly. That's why I brought it up, because there's always these operational issues that just make common sense to do. Concord, I know that there was a lot of discussion around that, but in all honesty, if we go down and there's no bridge there, what are we gonna do? We're gonna do 64th and then we're just gonna stop and turn around and go back? No, we're gonna go up Concord and we're gonna do that.
Good. One thing I want to bring, we've been talking about safe routes to school, and that is really important. But it's also important to allow flow down Concord so they can go across the bridge, go through the park, go to medical, go to, shopping, do a lot of stuff. And I do see people, who pull their little carts and all that. That does actually happen. Not a lot of people, but there are, 2 elderly people who are doing that, and they are going shopping. And so I think looking at that stretch of Concord, that's important. The other thing is I tried looking at schools throughout Edina to see where the green lines were. And it really seems like if we didn't do it, Concord would be kind of an outlier if you were comparing the other schools and just how much more connected they are. And it also dawned on me that if you were going to Concord and you lived in the country club area, you would have green plowed streets to get you into that neighborhood. And yet, and you should be able to have plowed, cleared sidewalk to get you into the Southdale area. It's the equity.
Regardless of the rationale, isn't that what you're saying, Brian?
Yeah, it's exactly what I was saying. We're gonna plow
Okay, good.
the sidewalk on Concord. But I wanted to call attention to Woodland Road because Woodland Road is one that was shown as to be privately done.
Yeah.
We've decided, because of operational issues, that it should be publicly done. But Tower and 58th, if you remember, were never included on the sidewalk plan. Those residents petitioned to have the sidewalk installed, but that's different.
That is different.
That's not us saying this is where a sidewalk should go and we're willing to maintain it. That's a resident saying, we want a sidewalk just because we like the look of a sidewalk.
Yep.
But you maintain it.
We don't maintain Tower and 58th.
56.
56, excuse me.
Maintain 58th because that's a state aid street.
Correct.
58th is a state aid street.
And at the time those sidewalks were put in, Tower and 56, we communicated to the residents that they would be maintained by them.
Maintained, yeah. And we don't.
We don't, and we aren't. But those are the discussions that we need you to stand behind, because when we get those questions and comments, how come you don't plow this when you plow Woodland Road? Well, Woodland's different because the constraints of the right-of-way didn't allow for a big boulevard in that area, so we ended up with a sidewalk right next to the road. So we did it for operational reasons, not necessarily for what was in the ordinance.
You know what would be super helpful is just, because when we get plans coming before us with sidewalks, knowing, the details like that, so that when, it's going in, it's not gonna end up being a problem for you if there's a weird little variance or something like that.
We look at all the plans when they do a feasibility study, and we work together with the recommendation that they come up with to what we do maintain and what we don't, what meets the intent of our sidewalk and path plan, what doesn't.
It's in our engineering studies. You'll see that for presidents on December 9th this year. And Public Works comments on it, police and fire, we get all those comments baked into the study.
I was just gonna say, in those reports, you'll often see us talk about a boulevard-style sidewalk and the importance of a boulevard for snow clearing and pedestrian and bicycle safety, and this is exactly why we try to fight so hard for those boulevards.
So maybe if we do this, so I was gonna ask, are there cities that look at their overall map of sidewalks and then figure out safe paths to get to certain destinations and then only plow that and mark those routes?
Yeah,
We
so
do
ultimately reduce,
the miles plowed, yeah.
as the other
Does that
variable.
make sense?
Yeah.
It does.
I don't know.
We're doing
Do many cities do that, or do
but-
we do that? I don't know.
So again, right now, the practice is based on what's in the arts plan. Now, that doesn't take into consideration that since then, we've adopted the ped and bike master plan, which is where a lot of these additional sidewalks came from.
Yeah.
And when that plan was adopted, there wasn't really discussion about what are we gonna maintain, what are we not gonna maintain, particularly around the schools. It was just expected that we were gonna follow our current practice. I think you'll find in most cities that the state, we're similar in plowing the state right-of-way, county right-of-way, MSA streets, probably some others in the commercial areas. But I don't know to what extent they've done that kind of analysis.
Kind of like doing the same as I think safe routes to school. You would, I don't know, safe routes to 50th France. I don't know.
I think we could look at it and set some parameters. Feels like we'd be taking service away from people, and that's a tough
Yeah,
discussion.
saying, well, if you want to get there, you have to take Southview Lane and Concord to get to Kellogg.
I don't know if that would be in the safe
I
streets.
don't know.
So, Brian, are you recommending operationally to do both Wooddale and Concord? How does the driver
It's
work?
interesting because I don't want to recommend because they don't recommend, but I understand and we absolutely will do it anyway because we're doing the loop. We have to go down to 64th. The sidewalk is on the south side of the street on 64th. There is no resident adjacent to that's gonna do that sidewalk, so we have to do that. We've always done the path between the lakes.
Yeah.
By Nancy Lane, we've always done that.
In
And we will continue.
2026, now we'll have a bridge to maintain that we don't today too. So there's gonna be more operations to talk about. Up and over the ramps, across the bridge, because we expect that facility to be open in the winter months, so.
To me, I think it makes sense to do that loop.
Okay, that's great.
And I don't think we should take away service just because the bridge gets constructed.
So we would look to council to make a motion tonight and direct us to do that.
Yeah.
Because that's kind of outside the level of what other.
For standard practice.
Because we're not asking for a policy change.
Right.
But what do you want from us tonight in addition to that relative to the bigger picture? Is this just, are you satisfied with this discussion that's going on? 'Cause I don't think any of us can really tell you, what do we like, A, B, C, D, E?
We just wanted to get your opinions on where do you think, we just wanted to know if you said we need to maintain every sidewalk, we'd be going back
One thing I want to do
and.
is go back to what James raised early on, and I don't get this either, I haven't ever gotten it, and that is, we got this PAX fund, so now we put a new sidewalk in on Concord. We said we're putting in a sidewalk to create better connectivity, separate people from traffic. And then 10 years from now, it's heaved in a couple places because of tree roots. And now we're telling somebody who lives in the place where that tree is located that they got to fix a sidewalk. To me, that makes no sense. It should all be coming out of the PAX fund, in my opinion. we shouldn't be assessing any adjacent property owners for improvements on the sidewalk. It's a system that serves the whole city.
And I think in the past, we didn't have data to even know how much that would be. Derek's in year 2.
Right.
And now we can start to pull numbers together and come back and say, Mayor, to maintain all these, it's gonna be this price. And do you wanna spend 75% of the PAX fund just maintaining sidewalks? Or do you wanna build out sidewalks? Or is there some middle ground there with additional funding sources? So
And expand the PAX fund. I mean,
Right.
raise the fee.
But I also recall at the time when the PAX fund was set up that it was very controversial and that you wanted to make sure that you showed improvements, capital improvements to the system, not operational expenses. And so we've tried to do that and stay away from that in terms of operational, but right now we're getting to a point where we're really at a.
Because
What's
we've
the right
had it in place
balance?
for a decade now.
Yep.
Yeah.
what's the right balance, I think we're talking?
I think repairing broken sidewalks is capital though. I don't see that as operations. I see that as, you know,
If we're,
asset preservation, really.
No different than maintaining a
then
street.
maintenance.
Right,
Yeah.
exactly.
That's what I think too.
Well, so I personally would, and I don't know to what extent we're able to do this, but the point that Member Agnew made, what is the variability in the system? And if there isn't any, that's fine too. But I think knowing that, because it's like without that, like I said, I agree with Member Jackson, Member Agnew. It's hard for me to know what data I would use to say, keep it the way it is and add more sidewalks. That doesn't feel like the right answer, but I don't have other data that would suggest not to at this point.
So in the Transportation Commission, Andrew, what are you guys doing with aren't you sort of going through all the different bicycle plans and consolidating them?
The Transportation Commission has an initiative, well, there's two things. The Transportation Commission has an initiative to review the Ped and Bike Master Plan, basically report on how well have we been implementing it in the 6 years that we've had it. Separate from that, the city is going to be developing what we call a Safe and Equitable Mobility Action Plan, or a CMAP, that essentially looks at all of our current guiding documents and tries to consolidate them down into one comprehensive plan. So that work will include, one of those plans is the Active Routes to School plan. So the development of that will include kind of reevaluating what are the goals and recommendations of that plan and to what extent should they be updated to reflect, you know, current conditions.
And that'll happen next year. We got a $200,000 grant to do that
And
update.
that's, so, I'm sorry, there's a lot of acronyms in what you just said. So taking all of our bike and ped plans and consolidating them, am I correct in that, or?
Yeah, some of them.
And that's what the grant is for, in 2-year-old language, or kindergartner language, please.
Essentially, it's looking at the plans that we have right now, the Ped and Bike Master Plan, Living Streets, Active Routes to School, and as well as taking in considerations from like the Climate Action Plan and the Comprehensive Plan, and creating an updated mobility action plan.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, I think we got what we needed.
All right.
What kind of money are we projected to get out of that active transportation funding package from the state? Both directly or potentially indirectly. We got that money coming to the region, 25 million. What comes to the Edina direct?
I don't recall how much our cut of that is.
Well, just that, I mean, the active transportation, there's 2 buckets, right? There's outstate. When you see the terms active transportation solicitation, that's just for outstate. What the Med Council have done is they've taken some of that active the 25 million that you're talking about, and they're doing it as part of the regional solicitation with the Met Council. That you're part of, with the
That's what I'm
TAM.
part of, but I thought that there was separate money coming to the cities.
As it like a standing appropriation for us?
Yeah, it was like a CDBG grant out of that active transportation like that. It wasn't just from the region, maybe.
I don't think so.
There was a little bit added for state aid. We got 35,000 for state aid, but I don't think that was the same thing. We can look into that. Okay.
One thing, this is just a little side thing, you know, Brian, you talked about how hard it is to maintain sidewalks on the county roads when they come and plow over what we've just done, cover up the sidewalks again. I noticed we got a little bit of that same problem down at Cornelia. Your guys are really out there early, cleaning those trailways, those pathways around the lake, you know. And then the crew comes along on 66 and kicks snow up on the pathway that's just been cleared, and then it sits there for days until maybe the sun melts it off. So I don't know, just something to keep in mind operational.
Well, that's part of the reason why our sidewalk machine needs to be out more than just to get through the initial system. It has to go through and clean up after. Sometimes there's just no way around that, and I understand, you know, that our street plow pushes, but it can't go through the whole system without having that happen a couple times.
I get it.
So when we think about going forward, let's think about whether the variability on staffing, whether having a 2-shift on the same machine, I would do that before I would just add, you know, everything. And I don't know what the negotiations are like on that, but if that's possible, I think that's a good interim step for increasing service.
I'm looking at the Minnesota Department of Health, and there's this document that says that additionally, Americans with Disability Act requires maintaining ADA compliant access to walkways year-round, which includes snow and ice clearing. So with our additional work enhancing ADA sidewalks, could there be grant money through
For operational expenses?
Yeah, or for equipment?
Doubtful.
Doubtful, but we can look.
But maybe for the construction piece of it, there's typically
Mm-hmm.
grant support.
So from a practical standpoint, what we got to be concerned about short term is we had that little segment of Concord, it sounds like, and then it's maybe a mile or two over the next couple of years that we might add to the responsibilities that people have now from an operational standpoint.
Yeah, and we'll keep having the discussions when we propose sidewalks to you and let you know where we're adding them, are they private or public on that, what we do today, as we also get together more information that we heard from you tonight.
I know, we'll have to look at the contract, because the contract specifically says that we don't hire anybody outside full-time staff.
We could change the contract if it's in the future.
Well,
Okay.
I know, but we might as well get started for it.
No, just saying.
What's that?
10 years.
10 years.
Is that a 5-footer we put in on?
No, that's a good point. It would probably shorten the life of it, but we would.
and it's a hard job. I mean, that's the other, there's lots of variables in this process. This, how much snow we got, what's the wind like, or are there people parked on the street? Is the equipment damaged? You know, we keep 4 or 5 mechanics kind of moving all winter long doing repair to the fleet, but the work itself is hard work, right? So we don't want people out there for 16 hours at a crack. So there are times when the machinery and the people have to be rested, even during the kind of the height
I
of it.
was thinking if we were to add I don't know there's no reason to add, if we don't have to add both staff and equipment, if we just add staff and have 2 shifts, not someone doing a double shift.
Yeah.
We want everybody to be safe. We don't want,
Absolutely.
Training for council members.
yeah.
There you go. You can't ride along, you have to drive one, because there's only one single seat.
No.
We got 5.
We're not gonna do that.
Why not? They don't need a CDL to drive
Oh,
that.
God, okay.
Mayor, did you have a question?
You don't want to.
Sidewalk?
No.
Okay.
We'll ride along.
It's like MnDOT making the engineer.
I was just confirming that Concord was a 5-foot.
It is, yep.
It is.
Yeah. So I want to see everybody out there driving a $150,000 piece of equipment down the sidewalk. That would take photos.
Okay, appreciate it, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So you have no idea.
All right, we can adjourn.
All right, all right.